Every morning, Harold would shuffle into his cozy kitchen, sunlight breaking gently through the curtains, and set a small pot on the stove. For the last 15 years, oatmeal had been his morning ritual, a warm, filling meal that made him feel like he was doing something good for his body. He had read once in a doctor's magazine that oats help lower cholesterol and stabilize blood sugar, and at age 73, that seemed like reason enough to keep his routine. Harold wasn't alone in this habit. Many older adults swear by oatmeal as a heart-healthy breakfast. It's easy to digest, packed with soluble fiber, and provides slow-burning energy. But what most don't realize is that the oatmeal itself isn't always the issue. It's what gets mixed into it. Over time, Harold had started adding a little this and that to enhance the flavor. A spoonful of brown sugar here, a handful of dried cranberries there, maybe even a splash of non-dairy creamer. They seemed harmless, especially compared to donuts or bacon. But the truth is more complicated. As we age, our metabolism naturally slows down. Our liver and kidneys, those hard-working filters, don't process additives and sugars as efficiently as they once did. The pancreas may become sluggish, insulin responses dulled, and that means every ingredient we add to our food carries more weight than it used to. What was once an innocent topping can become a daily burden on already sensitive systems. Harold began noticing small things. He felt more tired in the morning, even after a full night's sleep. His doctor mentioned slight elevations in blood sugar, small signs of inflammation, and changes in his kidney function. There was no clear illness, but something wasn't right. His morning bowl, once comforting, was possibly contributing to these issues. It was a strange realization that what he thought was a healthy habit might, in fact, be undermining his health. This story is not just Harold's. It's one that repeats in countless homes every day, and it's why understanding the full picture matters. Over the next few chapters, we'll gently walk through 7 common oatmeal additions up with white sugar on everything, but somewhere along the line, he'd heard that brown sugar was more natural, less refined, maybe even good for him. So when he started adding a heaping spoonful to his morning oatmeal, it felt like a small, wholesome indulgence, one that made the bowl taste comforting, just like his mother used to make. But in truth, Harold's body didn't know the difference between brown and white sugar. Once ingested, they broke down the same way, into glucose. For someone in their 70s, like Harold, that meant an immediate spike in blood sugar followed by a sharp crash. At first, it was easy to ignore. He thought he was just slowing down. He'd eat breakfast at 7 a.m., and by 9:30, feel oddly fatigued. Sometimes, his thoughts were foggy. Other times, he found himself craving something sweet again by mid-morning, even though he had eaten a full meal. It wasn't until his doctor suggested tracking his energy levels that Harold noticed the pattern. That cozy bowl of oats, sweetened with a generous spoon of brown sugar, was likely behind the tiredness, mood swings, and hunger pangs. His doctor explained that with age, the body's insulin response weakens. The pancreas doesn't produce insulin as efficiently, and the cells become less responsive to it. This makes the body more vulnerable to repeated glucose spikes, which over time can lead to inflammation, weight gain, particularly around the belly, and even type 2 diabetes. Harold was stunned. He had always thought of his breakfast as one of the healthiest parts of his day. And it had been, until that one sweet addition tipped the balance. At first, he didn't want to give it up. Brown sugar had memories baked into it. But with some encouragement, he tried alternatives. A few slices of banana offered natural sweetness without the crash. A pinch of cinnamon brought warmth and flavor. A drop of vanilla extract added depth without sugar. Within a week, the difference was noticeable. His mornings felt smoother. He no longer needed a nap before lunch. He even felt clearer, more alert. The best part? He didn't feel deprived. The oatmeal still felt indulgent, just in a gentler, more sustainable way. Harold's experience is a quiet lesson. Small changes matter, especially as we age. That spoonful of brown sugar, though innocent in appearance, can weigh heavily on a body already working harder than it used to. Replacing it isn't about punishment, it's about real support. Because the right sweetness can come from nature, not a bag. After cutting out brown sugar, Harold felt proud. His energy was better, his thoughts clearer, and his cravings had eased. But the human mind is creative, especially when it wants to keep something sweet. One morning, browsing the grocery aisle, he spotted a display of sugar substitutes, colorful packets labeled 0 calories, diabetic-friendly, and safe for blood sugar. It felt like a loophole. Could he enjoy his beloved sweet oats without the consequences? Harold picked up a box of artificial sweeteners and added a packet to his next bowl of oatmeal. It wasn't exactly the same as brown sugar, but it satisfied the craving. For a while, he thought he'd found the perfect balance: sweetness without sugar. But after several weeks, subtle discomforts returned. His digestion was irregular, his appetite unpredictable, and he found himself craving snacks more often, even though he was eating plenty. When Harold mentioned these changes to his doctor, during a routine checkup, she asked him to bring in everything he'd recently added to his diet. Holding the box of sweetener, she gently explained that artificial sweeteners, though technically sugar-free, can still confuse the body. And though his blood sugar hadn't spiked like with brown sugar, his body was still struggling in quieter ways. Harold felt disheartened. He had only wanted to do the right thing. The marketing on the box had promised so much, but then he remembered how good he'd felt after switching to banana and cinnamon. Maybe the solution wasn't finding a safe, fake sugar. It was letting go of the expectation that everything needed to be sweetened in the first place. So, he returned to his bowl with a new mindset. He added a few fresh apple slices one morning, a sprinkle of nutmeg the next. Sometimes he used almond extract, which gave his oatmeal a rich, warming aroma. The sweetness was subtler now, but it felt real, not manufactured. And most importantly, his body responded kindly. The quiet bloating eased. His hunger cues returned to normal. Sweetness, he realized, wasn't just a flavor. It was how his body felt when it was treated with respect. Harold had always kept a small glass jar of dried fruit on his kitchen counter. It was a habit that began years ago when his wife, Margaret, would pack him tiny containers of raisins or apricots in his lunchbox. Even after she passed, Harold held on to the ritual. So when he started eating oatmeal more regularly, tossing in a few dried cranberries felt not just familiar, it felt right. He believed dried fruit was healthy. After all, it came from real fruit. It offered fiber, nutrients, and a bit of natural sweetness. What could possibly be wrong with that? But over time, Harold noticed something strange. His stomach often felt bloated after breakfast, his pants fit tighter around the waist, and he was having trouble controlling his blood pressure despite following his doctor's advice. He didn't think to connect it to the handful of dried fruit. It seemed too small, too innocent. But during a conversation with his neighbor, Joanne, who also had been managing her health, she mentioned a podcast about sugar in healthy foods. Curious, Harold looked up the topic and was shocked by what he found. Unlike fresh fruit, dried fruit has had most of its water content removed. That means the sugars inside are far more concentrated. A small portion of raisins or dried apricots can contain more sugar than a candy bar, and often it's the kind of sugar that puts special strain on the liver. Fructose. Unlike glucose, which muscles and the brain can use for energy, fructose must be processed almost entirely by the liver. And if the liver is already under pressure from age, medications, or other health conditions, this extra sugar can begin to accumulate as fat. Over time, that leads to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a growing problem among older adults. Harold decided to run a quiet experiment. He replaced the dried cranberries in his oatmeal with fresh blueberries. The change was simple, but within a week, he noticed the bloating subsided. His digestion improved, and, surprisingly, the oatmeal tasted better. The juicy freshness of real berries made each bite feel alive, not dense or overly sweet. Now, Harold rotates between slices of apple, half a banana, or a handful of berries. Sometimes he grates pear with cinnamon. These small shifts support his liver, help stabilize blood sugar, and make him feel lighter. What he once thought was a harmless habit turned out to be a hidden trigger. But with one thoughtful change, he gave his body room to heal, and his breakfast new life. There was a time when Harold's mornings were unpredictable. Some days he felt rested and steady. Other days, his legs ached more, his hands seemed puffier, and his mood hung heavier than usual. On those mornings, he often reached for convenience, and familiarity, in minutes. But over time, the inconsistencies in how he felt began to bother him more. One afternoon, during a checkup, Harold's doctor asked about his sodium intake. Harold hesitated. He didn't eat fast food. He rarely salted his meals. But when she reviewed his pantry list and noticed the flavored oatmeal, she raised an eyebrow. Each packet contained around 250 milligrams of sodium, sometimes more. And that didn't include what he might add to the oatmeal or what he ate throughout the day. For someone managing blood pressure, that small packet wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Beyond the salt, there were hidden sugars and synthetic flavors. The maple flavor didn't come from syrup, nor did the apple taste come from real apples. Instead, the ingredients list included natural flavors, preservatives, and stabilizers. His doctor explained that while these additives may make food taste good or last longer, they offer no nutritional value. And for aging organs like the liver and kidneys, they create extra work. Harold listened. He hadn't realized just how much those convenient packets demanded from his body. It wasn't just about avoiding salt or sugar. It was about removing the hidden burdens. That weekend, he bought a bag of plain rolled oats. It took only a few minutes longer to cook, but the difference was night and day. He topped them with fresh apple slices and a sprinkle of cinnamon. The taste was warm, familiar, and real. Indeed, the weeks that followed, Harold's swelling eased. His morning stiffness wasn't as pronounced. He felt calmer, more in tune with his own body. What he learned was simple but profound. Convenience shouldn't come at the cost of well-being. By reclaiming a few quiet minutes in the morning, he gave his body a fresh start and found something better than instant gratification: lasting peace. For years, Harold kept a white plastic container on the shelf beside his coffee mugs. It was filled with powdered non-dairy creamer, something he'd started using after a neighbor mentioned it was lighter than milk. When Margaret was alive, they used to share real cream in their morning coffee. But after she passed, Harold began simplifying. Less mess, longer shelf life. It seemed practical. Eventually, he started adding a spoonful to his oatmeal too, enjoying the creamy texture it brought without needing to open a carton. It wasn't until he read the label, tiny print he hadn't bothered with before, that Harold began to reconsider. The ingredients were unfamiliar: hydrogenated oils, mono and diglycerides, artificial flavoring. He looked them up one by one and learned that hydrogenated oils were trans fats, long, known to raise bad cholesterol, LDL, and lower good cholesterol, HDL. Even though the container claimed 0 grams trans fat, he discovered that small amounts could still be present and harmful if consumed regularly. He remembered how his last blood test had shown rising cholesterol despite his efforts to eat better. He thought he was avoiding obvious fats, but this invisible one had quietly slipped into his routine. Beyond fats, the powdered creamer was filled with stabilizers and synthetic flavorings. These didn't nourish the body, they simply mimicked real cream. And while they improved texture, they added nothing the body could use. Worse, Harold's liver had to process them, adding strain to an organ already working to filter medications and age-related waste. His doctor had once explained that inflammation doesn't always come from dramatic sources. It can build silently, from things we consume daily without a second thought. The realization left Harold unsettled. This little scoop, this harmless powder, had become part of his life. More importantly, he felt like he had taken back control, not with drastic measures, but with awareness. That scoop of creamer had once represented convenience. Now, each choice he made represented care. His oatmeal became not just a meal, but a quiet act of kindness toward a body that had carried him so far. Harold had always believed in staying strong. Even in his 70s, he made it a point to take regular walks, stretch in the morning, and read health articles online. One such article caught his eye. It said older adults often don't get enough protein and suggested adding protein powder to breakfast, especially oatmeal. The idea seemed simple. Stir in a scoop, get stronger, feel fuller. Wanting to stay on top of his health, Harold went to the store and bought a big tub labeled Senior Whey Blend Chocolate Flavor. At first, it felt like a win. His oatmeal had a new richness, and the flavor reminded him of old-fashioned chocolate pudding. But over the following weeks, Harold noticed changes. His stomach was unsettled some mornings. He didn't feel as hungry at lunchtime, but oddly, he had less energy. Then came the swelling. His ankles puffed slightly, his hands stiffened by evening. He assumed it was just aging until a follow-up blood test revealed something troubling. His kidney function had declined. His doctor reviewed his diet and raised a gentle red flag. Many commercial protein powders, especially flavored ones, contain artificial sweeteners, thickeners, and preservatives, all substances that burden the liver and kidneys. For someone Harold's age, that extra workload wasn't insignificant. And while protein is important, his doctor explained, too much, especially in processed form, can be counterproductive. The aging body doesn't metabolize excess protein efficiently. The kidneys must filter it, and over time, that demand can contribute to fatigue, fluid retention, and elevated creatinine levels. Harold was stunned. He thought he was helping himself, but the powder he trusted was pushing his body harder, not helping it heal. With his doctor's support, Harold switched strategies. He began adding a spoonful of plain Greek yogurt to his oatmeal for a natural source of protein. On other days, he had a boiled egg or a handful of walnuts on the side. These small adjustments gave his body the nutrients it needed, but without the synthetic load. Within a month, he noticed the difference. His digestion steadied. The swelling receded. His appetite returned to a gentle rhythm, and his afternoon walks felt easier again. Most of all, he felt reassured, not because he had found a miracle, but because he had returned to real food, food his body recognized and appreciated. For Harold, Oatmeal was no longer just a meal. It was a daily conversation with his health. And with each mindful ingredient, he chose to listen, respond, and offer his body what it truly needed: nourishment without the noise.